2.4 million years ago, the Earth was a wild and unpredictable place. Vast ice sheets stretched across the planet, leaving much of the northern hemisphere covered in a thick, unrelenting freeze. The landscape was dominated by towering glaciers, frozen tundras, and sporadic forests. Massive predators, such as saber-toothed cats with razor-sharp teeth and dire wolves, roamed freely, while giant creatures like woolly mammoths and ground sloths trampled the plains. In this harsh world, survival was a constant battle. Early humans, with little more than their ingenuity and strength, had to navigate through extreme cold, find food, and fend off the deadly creatures that shared their environment. The simple act of living was a fight against the elements, the animals, and the unforgiving landscape. With no cities, no advanced technology, and no shelter other than rudimentary tools and caves, every day was a struggle. Stone tools, fire, and cooperative hunting were the cornerstones of survival in an ever-dangerous world. Yet, despite these overwhelming challenges, these early humans carved out an existence in this primal world, a world that set the stage for the evolution of the species that would eventually dominate the Earth. Wherever you're tuning in from, feel free to drop a comment. It's always nice to hear from you. If you'd like to hear more stories like these, subscribing is a great way to stay connected. Get cozy. It's time to let your mind wander, whether you're winding down to sleep or simply enjoying the calm. It's truly great having you here. Let's dive in. The planet was in the midst of the Pleistocene epoch, an era that unfolded over approximately 2.6 million years, deeply marked by the cyclical rise and fall of massive ice sheets. Imagine Earth as a world locked in a slow, endless dance between frigid cold and brief, warmer periods. A constant push and pull between freezing glaciers and temperate landscapes. During the glacial phases, glaciers grew so large that they covered vast regions, stretching across continents like enormous, creeping rivers of ice. These glaciers were thick enough to reshape mountains, carve valleys, and smooth entire landscapes. They formed ice caps that reached deep into the heart of North America, Europe, and Asia, locking them in a frozen state for thousands of years at a time. In these ice ages, Earth was transformed in ways that had lasting effects on the environment. When glaciers advanced, they didn't just freeze the landscape. They literally reshaped it. Rivers were blocked, mountain ranges were carved into jagged edges, and what was once land became submerged beneath layers of ice. Vast ice sheets expanded from the poles, stretching down to what is now the northern United States and parts of northern Europe. The Earth was at once frozen and alive with the forces of nature, carving a new world into existence. During the coldest periods, known as the glaciations, the Earth's surface was literally reshaped. The glaciers carved out huge valleys and fjords, cutting through mountains and creating landscapes that seemed alien. While the ice was at its peak, much of the world's surface was uninhabitable. Vast stretches of land were covered in ice, leaving behind frozen tundra with little to offer. Yet, even in these harsh conditions, life persisted. How? Through resilience and adaptation. As the ice receded, the world transformed again. The glaciers retreated, and Earth entered warmer interglacial periods. These warmer spells were a time of transition, where the cold, barren landscapes gave way to more temperate environments. But even in these warmer periods, change was constant. The Earth fluctuated between ice and warmth, never staying still for long. It was during these fluctuating periods that early humans had to figure out how to thrive. The constant environmental shifts meant that early humans could never truly settle into one place. Their survival relied on their ability to adapt new and often challenging conditions. It was a world where climate didn't stay predictable, and where everything from the weather to the geography was constantly changing. One generation might live through harsh cold, and the next might witness the retreat of the ice, ushering in a new era of warmer, livable climates. Early humans had to be adaptable, innovative, and resilient to survive in such a volatile world. This constant cycle of change made life both perilous and dynamic, but also offered opportunities for early humans to evolve and thrive. But Earth's changing face wasn't only about the climate. It was also shaped by the planet itself. The Pleistocene was an era of significant geological activity. The Earth's tectonic plates were shifting, and volcanic eruptions were common. These eruptions, which could spew massive amounts of ash and lava, were part of the Earth's slow, natural processes that reshaped the land. Entire regions were transformed as new mountains formed, volcanic islands emerged, and rich soils were deposited by volcanic ash, creating fertile grounds for new ecosystems to flourish. The volcanic activity wasn't just a geological phenomenon. It directly impacted the types of plants and animals that could survive in the aftermath, creating new niches and forcing animals to either adapt or perish. But it wasn't just the environment that was changing. The fauna that roamed the Earth during the Pleistocene were as dynamic and awe-inspiring as the land itself. The megafauna that dominated the landscape were animals of immense size and strength, each adapted to the harsh cold of the Ice Age. Woolly mammoths, with their massive tusks and thick fur, were the true giants of the land. These animals roamed in herds across the steppes and plains, their woolly coats designed to protect them from the freezing temperatures. These mammoths were not just giants in size. They were essential to the ecosystems that developed. They served as the main food source for early humans and many predators, and their bones were used for tools and shelter. Yet, despite their size and strength, the mammoths were not invincible. The Ice Age world was filled with formidable predators that could take down even the largest animals. The most terrifying of these was the saber-toothed cat. With its long, dagger-like teeth, this predator was perfectly suited to hunt large herbivores, including the mammoths. The saber-tooth was an apex predator, stalking its prey in the cold, dark forests of the Pleistocene. Its fangs were so long they could puncture the thick hide of a mammoth or other large prey, making it one of the deadliest hunters of its time. In addition to the saber-tooth, the Pleistocene was also home to the dire wolf, a much larger version of the modern gray wolf. These wolves were pack hunters, working together to bring down their prey. While the saber-tooth operated in a stealthy, solitary fashion, the dire wolf relied on cooperation and speed, making them a relentless force of nature. But it wasn't just predators that filled the landscape. There were other giant herbivores, like the ground sloth, which could reach lengths of up to 20 feet and weigh several tons. These slow-moving, giant creatures fed on shrubs and leaves, but their size made them nearly impervious to predators. These ground sloths were not just passive giants. They were part of a delicate balance. Early humans eventually learned to hunt these creatures, using their enormous bodies for food, hides, and tools. The Pleistocene was also a time of dramatic competition for food. Early humans had to not only find food, but also defend it. They learned to hunt in groups, using strategies to bring down large prey. The mammoths, sloths, and bison provided a rich source of food, but getting to them wasn't easy. Early humans had to outsmart, outpace, and outlast their prey, using tools and fire as their primary weapons. But these hunts weren't just for sustenance. They were tests of survival, demanding cooperation, intelligence, and the use of resources. In this environment of constant change, the relationship between humans and animals was not just one of predator and prey. Early humans had to coexist with these magnificent creatures. The megafauna were not only sources of food. Their hides, bones, and tusks became tools for building shelter, creating clothing, and even crafting weapons. The bones of the mammoth were carved into tools, and the skin was used to create clothing that protected early humans from the cold. Early humans learned to respect these creatures, using them for their survival, but also adjusting to the rhythms of their migration patterns and seasonal habits. But as the Pleistocene drew to a close and the climate warmed, the world changed once again. The megafauna began to disappear. This mass extinction, known as the Pleistocene extinction, saw the end of many of the giants that had once ruled the Earth. Climate change, human hunting, and the alteration of ecosystems all played a role in the disappearance of these creatures. The loss of the mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, and the giant ground sloths left a vacuum in the ecosystem. Early humans had to adapt once more, turning their attention to smaller prey, developing new tools, and finding new sources of food and materials. The Pleistocene was a time of constant change, a time when the Earth itself seemed to be in a constant state of flux. Yet despite the challenges and dangers, early humans managed to survive, adapt, and even thrive in a world that was anything but predictable. They learned to navigate the ice, hunt the giants, and eventually carve out a place for themselves on this ever-changing planet. Through their ingenuity, resilience, and ability to work together, early humans laid the foundation for the species that would eventually dominate the Earth. Around 2.4 million years ago, a new chapter in the history of humanity began. Homo habilis, often considered the first member of the genus Homo, emerged on the African continent. These early humans were relatively small-brained, but their emergence marked the first time in Earth's history that beings like themselves could wield tools and begin to manipulate their environment. In fact, this simple act of using tools signified a turning point, a spark that would eventually ignite the flames of human civilization. The tools that Homo habilis crafted were modest by today's standards, but they were revolutionary at the time. These stone tools, called Oldowan tools, were nothing more than rocks that had been chipped to create sharp edges. Early humans used these tools to break open bones, butcher meat, and cut through plant material. But beyond their utility, these tools represented something much more significant: the ability to think ahead, to craft, and to problem solve, the very process of making tools. Selecting the right stones, chipping them in specific ways, and using them for tasks required a level of cognitive thought that was unprecedented in the animal kingdom. This was the dawn of human ingenuity, and with it came the beginning of a journey that would span millions of years and ultimately lead to the development of civilizations, technology, and societies. As early humans continued to evolve, they learned to improve and refine their tools, which laid the groundwork for even greater innovations to come. While Homo habilis laid the foundation, it was Homo erectus, appearing around 1.9 million years ago, that would become the pioneers of human adaptability. They were the first to show significant advances in both brain size and technology. Their larger brain, compared to Homo habilis, allowed for more complex thought processes, and this is when we begin to see more sophisticated tools emerging. One of the most important developments during this time was the discovery and mastery of fire. Before Homo erectus, early humans had likely encountered fire, perhaps from natural sources such as lightning strikes, but they were not able to control it. With Homo erectus, fire became more than just an elemental force. It became a tool, a symbol of human control over nature. Fire provided warmth in freezing climates, which was crucial during the Ice Ages, allowing early humans to survive in environments that would have been inhospitable without it. Fire also had a profound effect on diet and nutrition. When early humans learned to cook food, they not only made it easier to digest, but also unlocked greater nutritional value. Cooking meat, for example, made it more digestible and safe to eat, and it was likely during this time that early humans began to consume more meat than their predecessors. With this increased energy intake, their brains grew larger, marking another evolutionary leap. But fire was not only about warmth and cooking. It also offered protection from predators. Imagine the danger of being surrounded by large predators, like saber-toothed cats or dire wolves. Early humans didn't have the physical strength or speed to outpace these fearsome creatures. But fire gave them a weapon that was powerful and effective in warding off even the largest predators. It provided a safe space around the campfire, where groups of early humans could rest, eat, and socialize without the constant threat of an ambush by a hungry carnivore. The mastery of fire and the increase in brain size enabled Homo erectus to leave the warm plains of Africa and begin migrating across the world. The first major migration occurred when Homo erectus spread into the Middle East, then further into Europe and Asia. This was a monumental shift in human history. For the first time, early humans were moving out of the relatively safe environments of Africa and into new, often harsh climates. They encountered new challenges: cold, unfamiliar landscapes, new predators, and a different set of resources. Yet Homo erectus adapted. They learned how to survive in temperate forests, high-altitude areas, and even in the frozen tundra. They became the first truly global species, spreading across continents and leaving their mark on every corner of the world. But survival was never guaranteed, especially in such diverse environments. That is where the social structures of early humans came into play. Early humans lived in small, close-knit groups, likely extended families or bands of related individuals. These groups were crucial for survival, as cooperation allowed them to share resources, protect each other from predators, and hunt more effectively. Early humans were not solitary creatures. They depended on the strength of the group to thrive. It is likely that early humans also began developing some of the first forms of social structure, with clear roles and responsibilities within the group. Some may have been responsible for hunting, others for gathering, and still others for defending the group from external threats. These roles, combined with the ability to cooperate, ensured that early humans could survive in such a dangerous and unpredictable world. Communication played a vital role in this cooperative society. Early humans did not have a written language, nor did they have complex verbal communication. However, as their brains grew, so did their capacity for communication. They began using vocalizations, gestures, and facial expressions to communicate essential information to one another. Early humans likely used simple sounds to convey emotions, warn of danger, or signal the need to hunt. Over time, these vocalizations would have evolved into more complex forms of language, allowing for the exchange of ideas, knowledge, and plans. Communication became the glue that held early human groups together, allowing them to coordinate their activities, defend themselves, and plan for the future. As early humans adapted to new environments and developed more complex social structures, they began to engage in the first forms of cultural expression. Evidence of this can be seen in the discovery of cave paintings, carvings, and other early forms of art. These early artworks were not just decoration. They were a reflection of the world around them. Some cave paintings depict animals, likely those that early humans hunted, while others may represent spiritual beliefs or rituals. Some researchers believe that these early forms of art were used to ensure successful hunts or to communicate stories about the world beyond immediate survival. These artworks mark the first signs of culture, of early humans grappling with the big questions of existence and their place in the world. At this point in our story, the journey of Homo erectus had already set the stage for everything that followed. The innovation of tools, the mastery of fire, the migration out of Africa, and the emergence of social structures were all critical milestones in the development of humanity. However, what came next would be the true test of human ingenuity, the ability to adapt and thrive in a rapidly changing world. As the ice ages rolled on and ecosystems fluctuated, early humans would continue to face new challenges. But the tools, strategies, and social bonds they developed would ensure that they not only survived, but thrived. The story of Homo habilis and Homo erectus is one of transformation, adaptation, and survival. From simple stone tools to the control of fire, from small social groups to the first global migration, early humans began to shape their environment, not just to survive, but to create the foundation for what would eventually become modern human society. The innovation and adaptability shown by these early humans would serve as the cornerstone for the development of civilization, technology, and culture. Stone tools were not just tools. They were the beginning of a revolution in human survival. Around 2.4 million years ago, early humans learned to shape rocks and stones, not just to use as objects, but to transform their environment. Homo habilis, with their relatively small brain size compared to modern humans, became the first creatures to create and use these tools. But these were no ordinary stones. The first stone tools were what archaeologists call Oldowan tools, named after the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where the earliest evidence of these tools was found. These tools weren't complex machines, but simple rocks with sharp edges that were chipped and flaked to create a cutting surface. The genius was in the simplicity. The act of deliberately shaping a stone to make it sharper was something never seen before in the animal kingdom. These early tools had a profound impact on human survival. Early humans used them to butcher animals, crack open bones to extract the nutrient-rich marrow, and even cut plants for food. But perhaps the most important aspect of these tools was their role in manipulating the environment. The sharp-edged rocks were used to process food more efficiently than ever before, allowing early humans to unlock new resources that would have been difficult to access otherwise. They could now obtain more nutrients from the animals they hunted and the plants they gathered, which was critical for their survival in the harsh environments of the time. The creation of tools wasn't just an accidental discovery. It was a milestone in human evolution, signaling the beginning of an entirely new way of life. Over time, the tools became more refined. Early humans didn't just stop at the first stone implements. The tools evolved, growing more specialized and sophisticated. Some tools became designed specifically for hunting and butchering, while others were made for scraping hides, cutting wood, or even shaping other tools. This was the birth of human ingenuity, learning not just to survive, but to shape the very tools that would help them thrive in an ever-changing world. As time passed, stone axes, scrapers, and hammers appeared, each more specialized than the last, showing an ever-deepening understanding of the environment and how to use it to their advantage. Early humans had unlocked the first level of survival innovation, and the next challenge was to use fire, a power of nature that had always existed, but that they had yet to master. Fire. The discovery and control of fire marked one of the most significant leaps in human history. It wasn't just a tool. It was an elemental force that had the power to transform early human life in every way. Fire provided early humans with warmth, something crucial during the harsh ice ages when temperatures could drop to unbearable lows. The cold didn't just mean discomfort. It meant life and death. Without fire, survival in the coldest climates would have been nearly impossible. But fire did more than just keep them warm. It was the perfect equalizer for early humans in a world that was full of dangers. Early humans learned that by using fire, they could cook food, which had monumental implications. Cooking food, especially meat, unlocked extra nutrients and energy that would otherwise have been inaccessible. In fact, cooking helped early humans digest food more easily, making it possible for them to extract more nutrition from the same amount of food. This extra nutritional gain didn't just make them stronger. It was a critical factor in the development of larger brains. Early humans who could cook food were able to fuel the growth of brain tissue, and as their brains grew larger, so did their cognitive abilities. This wasn't just a minor improvement. It was a biological and evolutionary leap, marking the beginning of the cognitive revolution that would later lead to language, culture, and advanced technology. But fire was not just about food. It was a defense mechanism, too. Imagine a world full of wild predators, some of which could easily overpower you. Early humans didn't have the speed, strength, or sharp claws of other animals, but what they did have was fire. Fire was used as a tool of defense, creating a perimeter of safety around their camps at night. It protected early humans from predators like saber-toothed cats, hyenas, and other carnivores that would have been lurking in the darkness. The light and warmth of fire also extended the day, allowing humans to remain active long after the sun set. At a time when survival was all about making the most of every moment, fire was the tool that expanded the hours in a day, offering more time for social interaction, tool-making, and planning. The fire wasn't just a simple flame. It was the center of early human society, providing light, warmth, and protection against the vast wilderness that surrounded them. As Homo erectus began to spread across the globe, their mastery of fire was one of the key factors that allowed them to survive in such diverse climates, from the freezing cold of northern Europe to the heat of Asia's deserts. Fire helped them adapt to these new environments by making it possible to cook food, stay warm, and create shelters in even the harshest conditions. The control of fire opened the doors to new opportunities for early humans. Sheltering in caves and constructing simple dwellings became far more feasible with the warmth and light that fire provided. But more than that, fire was a symbol of human mastery over nature, a tool that could shape the environment in ways that no other species could match. While fire was crucial for survival, early humans continued to innovate and refine their tools, and each step forward in technology brought them closer to becoming the dominant species on Earth. Stone tools were only the beginning. As early humans advanced, they began crafting tools not just for hunting and gathering, but also for defense, shelter, and tool-making itself. The development of specialized tools, such as the bow and arrow, spear points, and cutting implements, marked a significant advancement in technology. These tools allowed early humans to hunt larger animals, build better shelters, and defend themselves against larger, more dangerous predators. It wasn't just about survival. It was about creating a world where humans could flourish. A world where technology wasn't just a reaction to their environment, but a force they could control. Each technological breakthrough, from the simplest stone tools to the mastery of fire and the development of specialized tools, brought early humans one step closer to shaping their future. These early innovations were the foundation of everything that followed, from agriculture to the rise of cities and the eventual development of complex societies. While we often think of technology as a modern phenomenon, it is in these early breakthroughs that the seeds of technological progress were planted. The tools of survival, from simple stones to controlled fire, were the first steps in the story of human domination over nature, setting the stage for an evolutionary journey that would change the world. The Pleistocene epoch was a time of extremes, where giant creatures roamed the earth, a world both majestic and perilous for early humans. And megafauna, those colossal creatures that dominated the landscape, were not only fascinating because of their size, but because they shaped the environment and the survival strategies of early humans. To understand the true impact of these animals on early human life, we need to step into their world and explore how predators and prey interacted, and how these interactions influenced human evolution. In the Pleistocene, predators were not just bigger versions of today's animals. They were apex hunters, perfectly adapted to the challenges of a cold, unpredictable world. One of the most iconic and terrifying creatures of the time was the saber-toothed cat. Smilodon, a predator with elongated canine teeth that could go up to 7 inches long. These cats were not just hunters. They were silent assassins, relying on their stealth and speed to ambush prey. Early humans, unlike many animals, were not physically equipped to take on such dangerous foes. The saber-tooth's ability to pounce from cover and incapacitate its prey in a single strike made it one of the most dangerous predators in history. The saber-tooth was built for the kill. Its teeth, sharp enough to puncture deep into the throat or spinal cord of its prey, allowed it to bring down animals far larger than itself. It is believed that Smilodon used a bite and hold technique, sinking its teeth into the prey and then using its muscular build to drag it to the ground. The kill wasn't instant, which meant the prey was often taken down after several minutes of struggle, giving humans and other prey animals a chance to react, sometimes forcing them to take defensive measures. Early humans needed to learn how to avoid these ambushes, using their intelligence and developing strategies for survival. In addition to the saber-tooth, there were dire wolves, much larger and more fearsome than today's wolves, and they hunted in packs. These wolves were built for endurance and teamwork, able to chase and bring down animals much larger than themselves. They likely used their superior strength and hunting tactics to overpower creatures like mammoths or bison, just as modern wolves do with elk or deer. The pack mentality made them more dangerous. Imagine early humans having to navigate a territory filled with these cooperative hunters, never knowing when a dire wolf pack might encircle them. Then there were the giant birds of prey. Yes, birds. Haast's eagle, the largest eagle species to ever exist, had a wingspan of up to 12 feet, and it was capable of hunting prey as large as the moa, an enormous flightless bird. Imagine looking up to see such a bird soaring above, its sharp talons ready to grab any vulnerable creature. Early humans had to develop tools and strategies to protect themselves from aerial predators, utilizing shelters, fire, and weapons to deter these large predators. Early humans, while they were starting to develop tools, had to live in constant awareness of the dangers that predators like these presented. Even smaller threats were a part of this ecosystem, such as hyenas and big cats, which would often scavenge after a kill. This meant that early humans were in a constant state of alertness, always watching for signs of predators. A single mistake, a single moment of distraction, could result in a fatal encounter. While predators like saber-toothed cats and dire wolves posed a constant threat, the herbivores of the Pleistocene, the megafauna, were no less important in shaping the survival strategies of early humans. Among the most iconic of these giants were woolly mammoths, which roamed vast steppes and grasslands of the time. The mammoth could reach 14 feet at the shoulder and weigh up to 6 tons. Its tusks, spiraled and curved, could stretch over 15 feet and were likely used for foraging, fighting, and clearing snow to reach food beneath. The mammoth was not just a sight to behold. It was a massive resource for early humans. Hunting such an enormous creature was not a simple matter of chasing after it with a spear. Mammoths were intelligent, powerful creatures that lived in herds, moving across vast landscapes in search of food. These herds were often led by the elders, who would have had knowledge of migration patterns and safe areas. The size and power of the mammoth required early humans to develop cooperative strategies for bringing it down. Hunters had to learn the behavior of these massive animals. Mammoths, for example, would often migrate in tight formations during the winter months, and early humans learned to trap them by driving them toward natural barriers like cliffs or into areas where they could be attacked more safely. Early humans likely used spears and fire to create traps or confuse the mammoths during their migration. But even with all the planning, hunting a mammoth was dangerous work. The risk of being charged by an injured or frightened mammoth was high, and such an encounter could result in death for the hunters. Besides the mammoths, other giants roamed the earth, like giant bison, ground sloths, and mastodons. These creatures were essential to the survival of early humans. Ground sloths, for instance, were massive creatures that could grow up to 20 feet in length. They were not just a source of meat, but also a valuable source of bone and hide, which early humans used for tools and shelter. The giant bison, though not as large as the mammoth, was still formidable and lived in large herds. These creatures provided meat, but hunting them required precision and the ability to work as a group. Early humans had to understand the habits and migration patterns of these creatures to ensure they could hunt them successfully. The hunt for these giants was central to early human life, and it was as much about strategy and cooperation as it was about physical strength. Early humans had to work together, often spending days or weeks planning how to bring down large prey. They used tools, fire, and even the environment to help capture these creatures. This form of hunting was a far cry from the solitary hunting of modern animals. It was a social event that required the coordination of the group. But as the earth began to warm, everything changed. The end of the Pleistocene epoch saw the extinction of many megafauna species, including the mammoth, the saber-toothed cat, the giant sloth, and the giant bison. The warming climate played a significant role in this extinction, as the cold-adapted species struggled to survive in a rapidly changing world. The glaciers that had once covered much of the northern hemisphere began to recede, leaving behind changing landscapes that no longer supported the same ecosystems. The grasslands that had once provided food for mammoths and other herbivores were replaced by forests, and many of the large herbivores that depended on open land for grazing found their food sources diminished. However, it is not just climate change that is thought to have led to the extinction of these creatures. Overhunting by early humans is also a significant factor. As human populations grew and their hunting techniques improved, humans began to target these megafauna for food, tools, and materials. The advanced hunting methods developed by early humans, including cooperative strategies, the use of fire, and more sophisticated tools, made hunting these animals easier and more efficient. As the climate changed, human pressure on these populations intensified, and many of these creatures could not recover fast enough to survive. The extinction of the megafauna fundamentally changed the course of human history. The loss of these massive creatures meant that early humans had to adapt once again. They turned to smaller prey, developed new hunting strategies, and began to domesticate animals. But the end of the megafauna was not just a loss. It was a new beginning. The extinction event created new opportunities for early humans to thrive in different ways. This shift eventually led to the development of agriculture, the domestication of animals, and the rise of more complex societies. The extinction of the megafauna was a defining moment in Earth's history. It reshaped ecosystems, altered human survival strategies, and set the stage for the development of modern civilization. Early humans had witnessed the rise and fall of these giant creatures, and in doing so, they had learned to adapt to the changing world, laying the foundation for all that would follow. Early humans did not survive alone in the harsh, unpredictable world of the Pleistocene epoch. They were part of small, close-knit groups, often organized around family units where every member had a role. These groups were vital for survival. The environment was filled with danger, and the challenges of gathering food, hunting, avoiding predators, and surviving in a constantly changing world required collaboration and cooperation. Think of early humans as the ultimate team players. Their very survival depended on their ability to function together, share resources, and protect one another. Cooperation was not optional. It was the difference between life and death. Each group member played an essential part. Some were hunters, venturing out into dangerous terrain to bring back food, while others gathered plants, fruits, nuts, and roots. Others still cared for the young and the elderly, ensuring that the most vulnerable members of the group were protected and provided for. Without this intricate division of labor, survival would have been significantly harder. The roles were probably fluid. As seasons changed or conditions varied, people may have had to switch roles or support each other in different ways. Imagine the different types of knowledge passed down from one generation to the next. Which plants were edible, how to track prey, how to protect the group from predators, and how to work as a team to ensure everyone survived. Sharing resources and making sure no one was left behind were keys to ensuring that all members of the group had the best chance of thriving. When early humans worked together to hunt, they had to strategize. The cooperation needed to take down large prey like mammoths wasn't just about strength. It required planning, patience, and above all, precision. Early humans had to learn how to coordinate their efforts, using tools and tactics to outsmart animals far larger and stronger than themselves. Imagine the experience of hunting a mammoth in a team. It wasn't just about throwing spears and hoping for the best. It was about timing, positioning, and creating traps or guiding the mammoth into narrow areas where they could bring it down with fewer risks. These group efforts would have been essential, not just for food, but for staying safe, ensuring that no one was left behind, and guaranteeing that everyone had a chance to eat. Communication was the key to all of this cooperation. Early humans didn't have complex spoken languages like we do today, but they didn't need them to survive. Their communication was based on vocalizations, gestures, and facial expressions, which formed the foundation of early human language. Picture a group of early humans out hunting or foraging. Communication would have been a constant, vital part of the process. A raised hand could signal the group to stop or be still. A hand pointing could indicate the direction of prey, and certain sounds could have conveyed danger or the need for help. Over time, these simple gestures and vocalizations evolved into more complex forms of communication. Shared experiences would have helped humans understand what different gestures, sounds, or expressions meant, gradually creating a rudimentary vocabulary that allowed for increasingly sophisticated communication. As humans' cognitive abilities grew, so did their capacity for more complex language. This wasn't an overnight development, but the need for effective communication during hunting, tool-making, and socializing would have driven humans to develop more nuanced systems of language. Nonverbal cues, tone of voice, and body language became important as the human brain began to adapt to the complexities of survival. It's fascinating to think about how these first forms of communication laid the groundwork for the development of spoken language, a key component of what would eventually become advanced civilizations. Early humans likely spent a lot of time communicating through shared experiences, passing down knowledge, and creating an emotional bond between group members, which ensured cohesion within the group. Social bonds created through communication were crucial for building a society where trust, solidarity, and mutual support were paramount. As early human social lives became more structured, their understanding of the world began to shift. The environment, the prey they hunted, the predators they feared, and the mysteries of the universe, these all shaped their worldview. Early humans weren't just focused on surviving the day. They were beginning to question their existence and understand their place in the world. This led to the development of rituals and spiritual beliefs. Early humans began to engage in activities that went beyond the immediate needs of survival, searching for meaning in a world full of dangers. Rituals became a way to give order to the chaos, foster community, and help early humans deal with the realities of life and death. Early burial practices offer us the first evidence of these spiritual beliefs. Imagine burying a loved one, carefully laying their body down with tools, food, and personal items, perhaps believing that these would help them in an afterlife or in the next phase of existence. This wasn't just a matter of disposal. It was ritualistic, suggesting that early humans saw death as a transition, not an end. These rituals allowed the group to cope with loss, and they created a sense of community that extended beyond the living. Death, as it turns out, wasn't something to be feared, but something to honor. Some anthropologists believe that these burial practices were the earliest signs of religious beliefs, with early humans believing in a spiritual world or life after death. There's also evidence suggesting early humans worshipped animals or believed certain creatures had spiritual significance. We know that animals like lions, bears, and eagles were revered by various cultures, and it's possible that early humans saw these animals as powerful symbols or even guides. Certain cave paintings depict large animals, possibly indicating an early form of totemism, where people attributed special powers or spiritual meaning to certain species. These animals, which were often seen as dangerous or majestic, likely represented strength, courage, or spiritual power. Early humans were also keenly aware of the natural cycles, the seasons, the stars, and the movements of the sun and moon. They developed rituals tied to these cycles, possibly celebrating the changing of the seasons with feasts, dances, or ceremonies. These rituals weren't just about understanding nature. They were about connecting with it, honoring it, and seeking guidance from the natural world. Through these early beliefs and practices, humans began to create meaning from their experiences, laying the foundation for more formal religions and spiritual practices that would eventually emerge as human societies evolved. The early development of rituals, beliefs, and spiritual practices wasn't just about explaining the world. It was about creating a sense of belonging, community, and identity. These practices bound people together and gave them a shared purpose. Over time, this sense of community and shared belief systems evolved into the cultural and religious traditions that would define societies throughout history. Early humans weren't just surviving. They were beginning to shape the way they saw the world and their place in it. As they began to create culture through communication, cooperation, and shared beliefs, early humans laid the groundwork for the complex societies that would emerge over time. From the first forms of language to the first rituals and spiritual beliefs, early humans were not just surviving. They were building the foundation for everything that would follow. They learned to cooperate, communicate, and create meaning in a world that, at first glance, seemed wild and uncontrollable. These early steps in human development set the stage for the rise of civilizations and cultures that would change the course of history forever. The Ice Age was an era when Earth was gripped by cold, creating extreme environments that would test the survival skills of even the most adaptable species. For early humans, life during this time was filled with hardships that pushed their ingenuity and resilience to the limit. Freezing temperatures, long winters that seemed to stretch on forever, and the constant threat of predators made survival a daily struggle. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, early humans managed to endure. How? It was not by luck, but through their adaptability and innovation. Every day was a battle for survival, where the smallest mistakes could lead to disaster, but the cleverness and cooperation of early humans kept them alive. The first and most immediate challenge during the Ice Age was the freezing cold. Imagine stepping outside, where temperatures often plummeted to dangerous lows. The bitter wind cut through the air, turning exposed skin into something that could freeze within minutes. To cope with such an environment, early humans had to learn how to control their surroundings. Creating fire and building shelters were the two cornerstones of their survival strategy. Fire, the ultimate survival tool, was critical for staying warm. Early humans learned to use fire for far more than cooking food. It became their lifeline in the harshest of conditions. Early humans didn't have the luxury of central heating or even insulated clothing like we do today. Instead, they gathered wood, animal fat, and dried vegetation, setting it ablaze to create heat in the freezing cold. The importance of fire cannot be overstated. It was life-saving. It was the centerpiece of early human existence, providing warmth, protection from predators, and light when the sun disappeared for months during the colder periods of the Ice Age. Fire also allowed them to cook food, breaking down tough meats and making them easier to digest, which provided essential nutrients in a time when resources were scarce. Creating fire wasn't as simple as striking a match. Early humans had to master the art of fire making, using friction, stones, and flint to create sparks. They tended the fire carefully, ensuring it didn't go out. In a world where temperatures could drop dramatically at night, a fire was the difference between life and death. But even with fire, early humans needed shelter from the cold, which is where their resourcefulness came into play. Shelter was a top priority. Early humans crafted simple yet effective shelters from the materials available to them. They would use animal bones, wood, and animal hides to build temporary homes that offered protection from the elements. Hides were essential. They could be stretched over wooden frames to form tents, creating windproof barriers against the cold. These shelters were carefully crafted, with a fire in the center providing warmth, while the walls of animal hides kept the freezing wind at bay. Early humans didn't have modern insulation or advanced architecture, but they knew how to use their surroundings to maximize protection from the elements. They were not merely surviving. They were adapting to the world around them in increasingly innovative ways. In addition to providing warmth, these shelters also offered protection from predators. The Ice Age was full of dangerous creatures like saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, and dire wolves, all of which were on the hunt for food. The shelters served as safe havens from these predators, who might be lurking just outside the firelight. Early humans learned to recognize the threats posed by these animals and used their intelligence to outwit them. The cooperation of the group was also essential for defending against predators. Working together in strategic ways helped them fend off or avoid attacks from dangerous beasts. These predators were powerful and fast, and while early humans lacked the physical strength or speed of these animals, they had something even more powerful: intelligence and strategy. Clothing was another key factor in surviving the cold. Early humans had to make clothing from animal skins, learning how to skin animals and turn their hides into warm garments. This process wasn't simple. It took time, skill, and patience. Early humans would first need to carefully scrape the hides, removing fat and hair, before softening the skin through soaking or working it to make it pliable. They used bones and stones as tools to cut and sew the skins together, creating cloaks, tunics, and leggings. These garments were critical, not just for warmth, but for protection from the harsh elements. Early humans learned that layering these animal skins created an effective insulation system that trapped warmth close to the body. The fur on the inside of these garments acted like a natural insulator, keeping the cold at bay while the outer skin provided protection from the elements. The process of making clothing required knowledge of the environment, as certain animals were better suited for specific types of weather. For example, mammoth hides were thick and insulating, making them perfect for winter gear, while deer skins might have been used for more flexible clothing during warmer months. But survival wasn't just about the physical environment. It was about the mental and social adaptation of early humans. They had to constantly innovate, developing tools and cooperative strategies to ensure the survival of the group. Hunting strategies became more sophisticated as early humans worked together to bring down larger prey like mammoths and bison. They learned how to track animals, set traps, and corral prey into areas where they could be overwhelmed. The hunting of large prey required skillful teamwork. One group would drive the animals toward another group waiting in ambush, or early humans would strategically use fire to drive animals into narrow passes or over cliffs. In addition to their immediate survival strategies, early humans also needed to manage food. They had to preserve what they hunted and gathered, ensuring they had enough food to last through the long, harsh winters. Early humans didn't have refrigeration or modern preservation methods, so they relied on drying, smoking, and freezing meat to make it last longer. They also learned to store food in caves or underground pits, where the temperature stayed relatively constant. This ability to store food, alongside the skill to hunt cooperatively, allowed early humans to survive the long winter months when food was harder to come by. As the Ice Age progressed, early humans developed more advanced strategies for dealing with extreme weather. They began using fire, not just to stay warm, but to manipulate the environment, setting controlled wildfires to clear paths or drive animals into traps. They used stone tools to chop wood, cut meat, and even make bone weapons that would allow them to defend themselves from both predators and other groups of humans. Early humans were innovators, constantly pushing the boundaries of what they could accomplish with the tools they had available. In essence, the Ice Age was a test of survival and adaptation. Early humans didn't just endure the cold. They harnessed it, using every ounce of their intelligence, resourcefulness, and social cooperation to survive and thrive in one of the harshest periods in Earth's history. From creating shelters and clothing to mastering fire and developing sophisticated hunting strategies, early humans were not just surviving. They were setting the stage for the modern world. They adapted, innovated, and cooperated in ways that allowed them to overcome the cold and the dangers of the Ice Age, laying the foundation for the rise of civilization that would follow. Migration was not just a simple journey. It was the defining action of human evolution. Early humans didn't simply wander aimlessly across the globe. They traversed vast distances, driven by the need to survive, adapt, and expand. The world they lived in was in constant flux, from fluctuating climates to the movement of megafauna and predators. And each new migration was a response to environmental pressures and the changing conditions around them. The story of human migration is one of incredible resilience and adaptive ingenuity. An ongoing saga of how humans took on the challenge of moving into the unknown, and in doing so, changed the very face of the earth. The great migration of early humans began in Africa, the cradle of humanity, but the pull of new lands. Unexplored territories, filled with new opportunities and challenges, pushed them to venture far beyond their ancestral home. These migrations weren't random. They were calculated, driven by environmental changes, food scarcity, and the need to escape predators. The movement of early humans was based on a deep understanding of the world around them. Environmental factors such as the retreat of glaciers, the warming of certain regions, and the availability of food sources all played a pivotal role in directing these migrations. Imagine early humans as highly attuned survivalists, able to recognize the signs of change, whether it was the movement of herds of animals or the shift in the seasons. That indicated it was time to move, and then calculating the best route to ensure their survival. The African homeland of early humans was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it provided the resources needed for early humans to thrive. Warm climates, abundant food, and an environment rich in life. But as the climate shifted, early humans found themselves facing new challenges. As the Ice Age began, the glaciers began to creep further south, cooling the planet and altering ecosystems. Africa's once fertile lands began to shrink, pushing humans to leave in search of better opportunities. The Great Migration wasn't a single event. It was a slow, gradual process where early humans learned to adapt their survival strategies, follow the changing resources, and spread out into new territories. One of the most famous migrations occurred when early humans crossed from Africa into the Middle East, traveling through the Levant and into Asia. This journey was no small feat, and it opened the gateway to the larger migrations that would follow. But it wasn't just about moving into different places. It was about adapting to entirely new worlds. The Neanderthals and other species had already occupied parts of Europe and Asia, and early humans were not just migrating into empty territories. They were encountering other human species, interacting, competing, and at times, interbreeding. This first migration to the Middle East and beyond brought early humans into contact with other groups, setting the stage for cultural exchanges and the eventual emergence of Homo sapiens as the dominant species. As these early humans traveled further from Africa into Asia and Europe, they encountered wildly different landscapes. The once lush forests of Africa gave way to vast steppes, tundra, and mountainous terrains. Early humans had to develop entirely new survival techniques to cope with these different environments. The tools they had developed in Africa had to be modified, and their hunting strategies needed to be adapted for the larger and more dangerous prey of Europe, like woolly mammoths and giant bison. In some regions, early humans had to contend with freezing cold, and in others, they had to navigate dense forests teeming with predators. The tundra of Europe was a particularly difficult environment, one where humans had to learn how to build shelters that could withstand bitterly cold winters. These shelters were carefully constructed from animal skins, bones, and wood, designed not just for sleeping, but for surviving long, dark months when food was scarce and the cold was unforgiving. One of the most remarkable things about these migrations is the way early humans adapted to different climates. As early humans ventured into Europe's icy tundra, their bodies gradually adapted to the cold. Over generations, early humans began to develop features that helped them survive in colder climates, such as shorter limbs and broader bodies, which were better at conserving heat, adaptations seen in the Neanderthals. As early humans spread across Asia, they encountered different ecosystems, from the jungles of Southeast Asia to the mountains of Central Asia. Each of these environments posed its own unique set of challenges, but each also offered new opportunities for survival. In the jungles of Southeast Asia, humans had to contend with dense vegetation, humid conditions, and a variety of dangerous wildlife. The skill sets that early humans had developed in Africa were tested again as they learned to build new tools, hunt new animals, and gather unfamiliar plants. Adapting to these new environments wasn't just about surviving. It was also about innovation. Early humans didn't just use the tools they already had. They reinvented them. In colder climates, they needed tools that could handle tough materials like ice and frozen meat. So they began crafting specialized tools from bone and stone. They innovated their hunting methods, using traps, spears, and even strategic use of fire to herd animals into narrow passes or other dangerous areas. These strategies required not just physical strength, but a deep understanding of animal behavior and the environment they lived in. Meanwhile, the migration into Europe and Asia brought with it new challenges. Early humans were not just facing the wilds of nature, but also the competition from other human species. The Neanderthals, who had already established themselves in Europe, were stronger, larger, and better adapted to the cold than early Homo sapiens. These early humans, however, had advantageous cognitive abilities and more sophisticated tools, which helped them adapt and compete. It is likely that early Homo sapiens interacted with the Neanderthals, and this interaction may have contributed to the evolution of modern humans, as both groups likely shared knowledge, technology, and perhaps even interbred. These interactions may have been the beginning of a cultural exchange that led to a greater understanding of survival and social cooperation across different human species. As early humans continued their migration eastward, they encountered new landscapes, from the mountainous terrain of the Himalayas to the vast plains of Central Asia. The challenges these humans faced were immense, but they didn't just endure. They transformed the environment. By learning how to adapt, innovate, and cooperate, early humans began to reshape the landscapes they traversed. The spread of humans across the earth was not a random act. It was driven by an inherent drive to expand and adapt. New technologies, such as the use of fire and tools for trapping, were crucial for ensuring survival. Eventually, these migrations would lead to the global spread of Homo sapiens, from Africa to the Americas and beyond. But this journey didn't just involve physical movement. It involved cultural evolution, technological innovation, and social cooperation. The migrations allowed early humans to exchange ideas, knowledge, and genetic material, creating a global society that would become the foundation for all the cultures, technologies, and civilizations that followed. These migrations, which may have begun as a means of survival, eventually led to the dispersal of humanity across every continent, each migration helping to shape the diverse peoples and societies we see today. Every new environment they entered required a new set of skills and tools, and with each new adaptation, early humans became more and more capable of surviving in even the harshest conditions. What began as a search for resources transformed into the journey of humanity, one that would eventually lead to the creation of complex societies, advanced technologies, and global civilizations. As early humans faced the challenges of the Ice Age and evolving environments, their brains began to evolve as well. The development of the human brain is one of the most remarkable stories in evolutionary biology. It wasn't just about growing larger brains. It was about complexity. Over hundreds of thousands of years, early humans saw a gradual increase in brain size, and with this increase came new cognitive abilities. Early human ancestors had brains that were much smaller than our modern-day brains, but the process of evolution gradually reshaped the brain into the remarkable organ we have today. The initial stages of brain development were likely influenced by dietary changes, as the growing brain required more energy. Early humans began to rely more heavily on meat, a calorie-dense food source, which provided the necessary energy to fuel the growing neocortex, the area of the brain responsible for complex thinking, planning, problem-solving, and abstract thought. This was a pivotal shift in human evolution. Early humans didn't just eat to survive. They ate to fuel their brain's growth, pushing the boundaries of their cognitive abilities and enabling them to face increasingly complex challenges. The more energy the brain consumed, the more it grew, and the more intelligent and social early humans became. As their brains grew in size, humans also began to think in new ways. Problem-solving was no longer just about surviving day to day. Humans began to plan for the future, not just for themselves, but for their entire group. Early humans were beginning to think about how to store food, how to cooperate in larger groups, and how to use their environment to their advantage. This was an era of social evolution. And with that came the need for communication. The development of language was a natural progression as the brain grew and became capable of more complex thought. The ability to communicate allowed humans to coordinate activities, share ideas, and work together in increasingly sophisticated ways. But this cognitive leap wasn't just about brain size. It was also about technological innovation. Early humans started with basic stone tools, simple, unrefined rocks used to chop and cut. But as time passed, they began to craft tools with increasing sophistication, not just for hunting, but for building shelter, for protecting the group, and for socializing. Tools were no longer just functional. They became a reflection of the evolving intellect of the human species. Tools were not just weapons of survival. They were vehicles of innovation, as early humans figured out how to manipulate their environment to enhance their lives. For example, early humans began to craft sharp-edged tools that weren't just good for cutting meat. They were also used for digging, scraping, and even building. They learned to use fire, and this wasn't just for cooking meat or staying warm. It was a means of adapting to new environments and extending their daily activities into the night. The control of fire was one of the most significant cognitive advancements. It allowed humans to expand their day, giving them more time to socialize, learn, and share knowledge, making their societies more connected and cohesive. The growth of human cognition was also closely tied to the development of social cooperation. Early humans didn't survive alone. They survived together. The first true social structures were built on the foundation of cooperation. Humans began to live in larger groups, and these groups weren't just families. They were complex social networks where everyone had a role. Some would hunt, others would gather, and some would protect the group, while others cared for the young and the elderly. The division of labor meant that people could specialize in different tasks, leading to efficiency and innovation. The brain's ability to process social information and cooperate was a critical factor in the success of early humans. Their brains began to grow not just for individual survival, but for group survival. The ability to communicate complex ideas, to coordinate activities, and to build social bonds helped early humans succeed in ways that other species could not. The ability to work together, share resources, and protect one another from predators was at the heart of early human survival. Social cooperation not only helped early humans find food and build shelter, but it also allowed them to create culture, pass down knowledge, and develop a sense of community that would be crucial for the development of societies. This social interdependence also meant that the brain needed to evolve to process complex social cues like empathy, trust, and cooperation. Early humans who were better at understanding others, communicating effectively, and building trust within the group were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. This increased social intelligence allowed humans to thrive in groups that became larger, more organized, and more successful than any other species. But technology wasn't just about tools. It was also about culture. With a larger, more sophisticated brain, early humans began to develop symbolism and abstract thinking. Evidence of art begins to appear during this period, with early humans creating cave paintings, carvings, and sculptures. These were more than just pictures. They were representations of how early humans understood the world around them. Early art was likely tied to spiritual beliefs, rituals, and communication. It's fascinating to think that some of the earliest forms of art might have been created not just to depict the world, but to connect with something beyond the immediate physical world. Early humans were beginning to ask big questions, questions that would lead to religion and philosophy. The emergence of abstract thought allowed humans to imagine worlds beyond the one they could see, creating stories, symbols, and beliefs that would shape humanity for millennia to come. One of the most interesting aspects of early cognitive development is the role that language played in all of this. While early humans didn't have written language, their ability to communicate was becoming more and more sophisticated. With the growth of the brain, early humans began to use vocalizations, gestures, and facial expressions to convey meaning. Over time, these early forms of communication became more structured, eventually evolving into complex languages. Language wasn't just about survival. It was a way to share knowledge, pass on stories, and teach future generations. As early humans developed language, they were able to organize their social groups, share knowledge more efficiently, and pass on innovations that would keep them ahead of other species. The development of abstract thought, coupled with the rise of language, culture, and technology, set humans on a path toward becoming the dominant species on Earth. The growth of the brain didn't just enable early humans to adapt. They allowed them to transform their environment, shape their destiny, and explore the unknown. The cognitive leaps that occurred during this time set the stage for everything from agriculture to the rise of cities to the complex societies we live in today. Through creativity, problem-solving, and social cooperation, early humans were able to not just survive, but to thrive. The evolution of human intelligence is a story of innovation, collaboration, and discovery. It's a story of how early humans used their growing brains to develop tools, culture, and societies, shaping the world around them and creating the foundation for the modern world. It's not just about the brain getting bigger. It's about how that growth led to new ways of thinking, new ways of living, and new ways of interacting with the world and each other. The human brain, in all its complexity, was built for survival, but it also became the engine of civilization, driving humans forward into the future with endless possibilities. Survival was the ultimate goal for early humans, and every day was a reminder of just how harsh life could be. Food, shelter, and safety were never guaranteed, and early humans had to hunt, gather, and forage for every meal. The unpredictability of their environment meant that they had to be highly adaptable to the seasonal changes, unpredictable weather, and the constant threat of predators. Hunting was an integral part of life, but it was far from easy. Early humans often went out into the wild, tracking herds of large animals like mammoths, bison, and deer, sometimes for days. These animals were not only difficult to catch, but also posed serious risks to the hunters. Imagine the danger involved in a failed hunt, when an early human would return empty-handed, knowing that their group would have to go without food for the time being. Hunger was a constant threat, especially during the long winters or in times of drought or food scarcity. There were no supermarkets, no storage of food. Each meal depended on the success of that day's hunt or gathering. The challenges of finding and securing food weren't just physical. They were psychological too, especially as early humans had to work together as a team to make the hunt a success. The group relied on each other's skills, knowledge, and social cooperation to achieve their goals. When the hunt succeeded, it was a moment of collective triumph. The meat from a successful hunt could feed a group of early humans for days, even weeks. But it wasn't just about eating. It was a moment of celebration. The meat, the bones, and the skins all had a purpose. These early humans didn't just use what they hunted for food. Animal hides were turned into clothing, shelters, and tools. Bones could be shaped into tools like knives, scrapers, and spears. So, when they were able to catch and butcher an animal, it wasn't just about feeding the group. It was a moment of creation and resourcefulness, where everything had a purpose. Yet these triumphs were often short-lived. The threats of predators were never far behind, and once the food was gathered, the focus would shift to safety. Large predators like saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and hyenas roamed the same spaces as early humans. Imagine being surrounded by dangerous beasts that were just as eager to feed as you were. Early humans had to remain vigilant and strategic in defending their group from these threats. Their survival depended on not just strength, but intelligence. Understanding how to use the environment to hide, distract, or deter predators. Fire was one of their most important tools, creating a perimeter of safety against the animals who roamed the night. As the seasons changed, survival became an even greater challenge. Winters were long and harsh, and the cold could easily kill anyone who wasn't properly protected. Shelters were not as comfortable or warm as modern homes. Early humans had to build shelters out of what nature provided: wood, bones, animal skins, and stone. These shelters were designed to keep the wind and snow at bay, but they still required constant upkeep and care. Fire was critical during these long, dark months, not just for warmth, but for light, protection from animals, and even social interaction. The group would gather around the fire, using it not just to cook, but to bond and share knowledge. Amid these struggles, moments of triumph were frequent. One of the most profound achievements in early human life was the first use of tools. Early humans were not born with the instinct to create. They had to learn, experiment, and fail before they could master the process. Imagine the first time an early human struck a stone to create a sharp edge, learning that the sharp flake could be used to cut meat, butcher animals, or even defend against predators. That first tool was not just a practical item. It was a symbol of intelligence and creativity. It marked the beginning of a journey where early humans didn't just adapt to their environment. They transformed it. When tools became more sophisticated, it was not just a technical advancement, it was a mental leap. Early humans began to plan ahead, carefully selecting materials, thinking about the shape and function of the tool they were crafting. They didn't just build hunting tools. They developed weapons to defend their families and hunting methods to bring down larger prey. They also crafted spears and traps, expanding their reach beyond their immediate surroundings. This innovation didn't just impact hunting. It shaped the future of human civilization. The first tool makers were the pioneers of what would become an ever-growing relationship between technology and human survival. The warmth of a campfire also marked a small but significant triumph. It wasn't just the light and heat it provided. It was a safe space where early humans could rest, share experiences, and bond as a group. Fire represented more than just survival. It was the heart of human connection. Early humans came together around the fire to tell stories, share knowledge, and pass down wisdom. They celebrated their victories. Whether it was a successful hunt, or simply the fact that they had made it through another harsh winter. Communities were built around the warmth of fire, and it became central to the survival of every group. Another triumph that must not be overlooked was the birth of new generations. A family unit was the cornerstone of human survival. While it was a constant struggle to feed, shelter, and protect oneself, raising children was the key to ensuring the survival of the species. Early humans passed down not just physical survival skills, but knowledge of how to build shelters, craft tools, hunt effectively, and even the social skills necessary to live in a group. The birth of a child meant the future of the group was ensured, and it was a moment of profound hope. Every generation carried with it the accumulated wisdom and experience of the past, and each new birth represented the continuation of humanity, a triumph against the uncertainty of the world. Yet life was far from easy. For every triumph, there were countless challenges. The winter months could be brutal, especially in colder climates. The threat of predators was a constant reminder that survival was never guaranteed. Early humans lived in a world where every moment could bring a new threat, whether from animals or natural forces. But the struggles didn't defeat early humans. They were the catalysts for progress and innovation. They pushed early humans to learn how to use their environment to their advantage, how to create shelter, fire, and tools that would allow them to face the challenges of the world head-on. Despite the hardships, early humans did not just survive. They thrived. They adapted, they innovated, and they learned from their struggles. Every challenge they faced, be it the threat of predators, the harsh cold, or the difficulty of finding food, was met with creativity, resilience, and a sense of shared purpose. And in this way, they laid the foundation for the future of humanity. Early humans had a unique relationship with the animals they encountered. It wasn't just about hunting them for food. These animals were woven into the very fabric of daily life. Early humans didn't simply see the creatures of the world as resources to be used. They understood them, observed them, and in many ways, respected them. Animals played a central role in the survival of early humans, but their significance went far beyond the simple act of hunting for sustenance. They were part of the spiritual landscape early humans built around them. Imagine the early humans staring up at the sky, watching the flight of eagles soaring above, or observing the silent movements of lions stalking through the grasslands. These creatures, with their power, grace, and mysteries, were not only part of the physical world. Early humans saw them as something much more. It's possible that early humans viewed certain animals as spiritual guides, beings that connected them to the larger forces of nature. Think of the lion, for example. Its majestic presence and ferocity might have symbolized strength, courage, or even the connection to a world beyond the physical one. The bear, with its powerful build and status as a predator, could have been seen as a protector, guarding the group and symbolizing resilience and survival in the wild. The flight of birds, like hawks or ravens, might have been associated with wisdom, guidance, or messages from the spiritual realm. The idea of animals being more than just prey or threats suggests that early humans may have had a more complex view of the world than we often give them credit for. Early spiritual beliefs were likely deeply intertwined with their interaction with animals. The way animals behaved, their patterns, and their symbols could have held meaning far beyond just survival. Did early humans see them as guardians or symbols of power? Did the hunting of a particular animal come with rituals or offerings to honor its spirit? The connection between early humans and their environment was likely built on respect and an attempt to understand the forces of the world. One of the most fascinating pieces of evidence comes from the cave paintings that have survived to this day. Some of the earliest human art shows not just animals in motion, but symbolic representations of these animals in ways that go beyond simple depictions of prey. These images suggest that early humans had an abstract understanding of animals. They weren't just about eating or protecting themselves. They were symbols representing something deeper. The bison, for example, wasn't just a meal to early humans. It was often depicted in dynamic poses, perhaps reflecting its spirit or the energy it symbolized to early humans. There's evidence that early humans may have even performed rituals to ensure the success of the hunt, potentially involving dances, chants, or offerings to honor the animals they sought to bring down. The concept of totemism, where specific animals were seen as symbols or ancestral spirits, also seems to be an early part of human spirituality. Certain groups might have viewed themselves as descendants of specific animals or believed that their fate was tied to the well-being of the creatures around them. The wolf, often seen as a symbol of loyalty and community, could have been tied to early human concepts of family and tribal bonds. The eagle might have represented freedom, or the ability to ascend beyond the struggles of earthly life, becoming a symbol of the human spirit's potential to rise above challenges. Through these symbolic and spiritual connections with animals, early humans developed an understanding of the world that went far beyond their immediate survival needs. The importance of animals in their spiritual beliefs suggests that they saw themselves not as conquerors of the natural world, but as partners with it, trying to coexist with these powerful creatures. They understood that their fate was intertwined with the fate of the animals, and in some way, the success or failure of a hunt reflected something deeper about their connection to the world they inhabited. One of the most compelling aspects of early human spirituality is the way in which animals were depicted not only as living creatures, but also as symbols of something greater, be it spiritual strength, wisdom, or protection. These early depictions were not simply an effort to document the world. They were an attempt to communicate the spiritual significance of the world, to understand the forces at play, and perhaps even to connect with the unseen. The art they left behind tells a story of humans striving to make sense of their place in the world, of trying to grasp something beyond survival, something more profound, something that reflected the world's mysteries. For early humans, animals were not simply entities in their ecosystem. They were part of the spiritual landscape, representing forces they could not fully comprehend, but could attempt to understand through rituals, art, and spiritual symbolism. The fact that these creatures were revered, symbolized, and depicted with such care reveals the depth of early human thought. This wasn't just about a simple connection to nature. It was an attempt to understand the forces that governed life itself, using animals as symbols for human experiences, fears, and hopes. Early humans didn't just live alongside animals. They saw them as part of their spiritual world, their guides, protectors, and sometimes even their enemies. This deep understanding of the natural world shaped their beliefs, their art, and their survival strategies, showing just how complex and rich early human life truly was. They saw themselves as part of a larger cosmic order, where their relationship with animals, as well as their environment, was far more intricate than merely seeking food or avoiding danger. The animals early humans encountered were not just passive actors in their lives. They were vital, active participants in shaping the world they inhabited, both physically and spiritually. They were teachers, allies, and symbols, reminding early humans that the world was more than just a place to survive. It was a place to understand, connect, and flourish. Early humans lived in a world that was constantly changing, where climate and geography were both threats and resources. They didn't just adapt to their environment. They actively shaped it to better suit their needs. The world they lived in was unpredictable, with climates that could shift from extreme cold to sweltering heat in a blink. Yet early humans thrived, constantly figuring out how to survive, adapt, and use the environment to their advantage. Every challenge they faced, whether it was bitter winters, mountain ranges, or raging rivers, pushed them to innovate and find new ways to not just survive, but to master the environment around them. The environment was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it could be incredibly hostile. Think about those long, harsh winters where food was scarce, or those mountainous terrains that were difficult to navigate. But on the other hand, it was also a resource, providing everything they needed to survive: food, materials, and shelter. Early humans didn't just exist in the world. They interacted with it in dynamic ways, manipulating the landscape to make it more livable. Geography played a key role in this interaction. Rivers, mountains, and forests were natural barriers, but also pathways for human migration. Rivers weren't just obstacles to overcome. They were highways of life. They provided water for drinking, fishing, and irrigation, and also served as transportation routes for early humans to move goods, or simply to cross to new lands. A river could guide people into new territories, opening up new opportunities for settlement and resource gathering. Some of the earliest human migrations followed river valleys, where the soil was fertile, the water was abundant, and food was easier to find. Mountains, while imposing, were not seen as barriers to early humans. They were challenges to conquer. Early humans learned to navigate rugged terrain, developing new techniques for climbing, hunting, and building shelters high in the mountains. These mountainous areas provided protection and were often rich in resources like stone and minerals, perfect for tool making. But not all terrains were as hospitable as rivers and mountains. Forests, dense and teeming with wildlife, posed a different kind of challenge. Early humans had to learn how to navigate and survive in thick woodlands, where they had to be alert to both prey and predators. The forest floor was an unpredictable terrain, sometimes full of dense vegetation that could be difficult to traverse. Yet, forests also offered a wealth of resources: wood for building shelters, fruits for foraging, and animals to hunt. The forest ecosystem was like an all-you-can-eat buffet if you knew where to look and how to gather. Early humans developed hunting strategies tailored to forest life, using traps, ambush tactics, and cooperative hunting to bring down the creatures that roamed beneath the canopy. As early humans moved into these different environments, they learned how to adapt their survival strategies. They weren't just reacting to the environment, they were shaping it. For example, when food was scarce, early humans didn't just give up. They learned to store food, preserve meat, and even use early forms of agriculture to cultivate the land. They learned to domesticate animals and grow crops, using tools to clear land for planting and build irrigation systems to bring water to crops. This was a massive leap in human survival, allowing early humans to settle down in one place and build communities rather than being constantly on the move. One of the most dramatic examples of how early humans shaped their environment came when they learned to harness fire. Fire wasn't just a tool for cooking. It was a transformative force that allowed early humans to clear land, protect themselves from predators, and warm their shelters during the cold nights. Early humans figured out how to control fire, learning not only to use it for warmth, but also to alter the landscape by setting controlled fires to manage vegetation. This allowed them to keep paths clear, drive animals into traps, and even change ecosystems to suit their needs. However, the changing climate created challenges that required even more innovative survival strategies. The climate fluctuated over the course of thousands of years, with cold ice ages giving way to warmer interglacial periods. Early humans had to adapt to these dramatic shifts. During ice ages, much of the world was covered by glaciers, and food sources became scarce. Early humans had to find ways to survive in the cold, developing better clothing, shelters, and tools to cope with the freezing temperatures. They relied on the migration of herds, following animals like woolly mammoths and bison that were better suited to the cold climates. In warmer periods, the glaciers retreated and new opportunities arose. Humans could settle in areas that were once uninhabitable, expanding into new lands that were full of bountiful resources like forests and grasslands. As the environment changed, so did the strategies for finding food and securing resources. Hunting became more specialized, with new tools and tactics developed to target specific animals. Humans also started to rely on plants more, learning to forage, gather, and cultivate crops. They began to develop a deeper understanding of ecosystems, knowing how to predict animal movements, identify edible plants, and even preserve food for lean times. Perhaps the most profound impact of climate change on early human life was the way it forced human evolution. Over time, as humans migrated into new territories and faced changing climates, their bodies adapted. In cold environments, humans developed shorter, stockier bodies that helped retain heat, while in warmer climates, their bodies became taller and more lean, better suited for heat dissipation. Their brains also grew, evolving to process more complex tasks, think more abstractly, and plan ahead for survival. These evolutionary changes helped early humans thrive in increasingly diverse environments, ensuring that they could face any climate, terrain, or challenge that came their way. Through all of this, early humans did not just survive the challenges of the changing environment. They shaped the environment to suit their needs. They adapted their tools, learned new strategies, and created innovations that transformed the world around them. They weren't just passive inhabitants of Earth. They were active participants, learning how to manipulate and mold the natural world to fit their survival needs. Every change in the environment, whether it was a change in the climate or the geography they encountered, pushed them to evolve, adapt, and innovate. What early humans accomplished during this time laid the groundwork for the civilization that would come to shape the Earth for millennia. As early humans faced the constant unpredictability of the environment, they needed to find a way to make sense of the world around them. The changing weather, the rise and fall of animals, and the cyclical nature of life could feel overwhelming. How could they explain the storms that suddenly appeared, the floods that swept away their shelters, or the powerful celestial bodies in the sky above them? Early humans began to look beyond the immediate physical world, searching for meaning in the forces of nature they encountered every day. They didn't just see nature as something to survive. It became a mystical force, one to be understood, honored, and even revered. Their spirituality grew as a direct response to the unpredictable forces of the natural world. These early humans didn't have written language or the concepts of science as we know it today, but that didn't stop them from observing, learning, and creating stories to explain what they saw. They began to interpret the world through spiritual beliefs and rituals tied to the cycles of nature, developing some of the earliest forms of religion and myth-making. The environment around them was unpredictable. Storms could flood their homes, the sun could disappear behind clouds for days, and fires could suddenly rage, consuming everything in their path. What were these powerful forces? Where did they come from? How could early humans understand these phenomena in a way that gave them some semblance of control? They turned to the mysterious forces in the sky and on the earth, giving them spiritual significance. The natural forces they faced were far from random. The storms, floods, and celestial events seemed larger than life, beyond human control. To early humans, the sky wasn't just something to look at. It was the realm of the gods. The storm, with its thunder, rain, and lightning, might have been seen as an angry god expressing wrath, or a force that had to be appeased. Perhaps the sun's disappearance for days, followed by its return, was seen as a symbol of rebirth. The sun dying and then being reborn. The moon rising over the horizon could have been seen as the pulse of life itself, guiding the rhythm of the tides and of life. Celestial bodies were not just distant lights in the sky. They were active participants in human existence, givers of life, and harbingers of fate. The heavens were where spiritual connections were made, where rituals were formed to ensure the safety and balance of the world. The mysteries of the night sky likely gave rise to early cosmologies, systems of understanding that helped early humans feel grounded and connected to something larger than themselves. Early humans found themselves in awe of the forces they couldn't control, and in that awe, they created rituals. These rituals became a way for early humans to connect with the world around them. Sacrifices, prayers, offerings. These practices were an attempt to please or appease the forces they believed had the power to shape their fate. Did the rainstorm bring flooding? Perhaps an offering of food or the sacrifice of an animal would calm the gods and bring balance back to the world. Rituals like these didn't just serve as a means of survival. They were a way to create meaning in the world, a world that could often seem chaotic and beyond human understanding. The elements themselves, earth, water, fire, and sky, became symbols in the minds of early humans. The earth, with its rich soils, forests, and mountains, was seen as the foundation of life. It was the place where plants grew, animals roamed, and early humans found shelter. To early humans, the earth may have been thought of as a living entity, one that provided everything necessary for life, but could also take it away. They respected the earth's power and the fragility of the balance it held. Water, too, had deep spiritual meaning. It was life-giving, nourishing, and essential for survival. But it could also be dangerous, as floods could wash away entire settlements. The presence of rivers might have been seen as a gift from the gods, something to guide humans across landscapes, but also a reminder of the power they held. Water, in all its forms, from rivers to lakes to rain, was a critical part of early human spirituality. Did it come gently, providing a life-sustaining flow? Or did it crash violently against the land in a storm, claiming the lives of those who lived too close? Early humans would have looked to the water as a symbol of life, but also of the unpredictable nature of existence. Fire was perhaps the most powerful and important element in early human life. It was essential for warmth, cooking, and protection, yet it was also destructive, capable of razing entire forests or homes in a single night. Early humans learned to control fire, but they didn't just view it as a tool. They saw it as a force to be respected. Fire wasn't just something to use. It was something to be harnessed. It became the heart of many rituals. Fire was used to light the way, to purify, and even to communicate with the spiritual realm. The warmth and light it offered became the center of early human social life, a place for gathering, storytelling, and bonding. But fire was also unpredictable. Too much fire could destroy everything, and it was this dual nature that likely gave fire its sacred status in early belief systems. The sky, too, was symbolic. The vast expanse above early humans wasn't just a place for stars. It was where the gods resided, watching over the lives of humans below. The sun's journey across the sky might have been viewed as a cycle of life, rising in the morning, traveling across the sky, and setting in the evening, only to be reborn again the next day. This cycle represented renewal, rebirth, and the eternal dance of day and night. The moon, with its mysterious phases, influenced early human activities, from hunting to planting crops to marking time for rituals. Early humans likely tracked the moon's cycles, connecting it to the rhythms of nature and their own lives. It is through these symbols, earth, water, fire, and sky, that early humans connected with the natural world in a deeply spiritual way. Their rituals, sacrifices, and beliefs were more than just methods of survival. They were attempts to connect with the forces of nature, to understand their place in the world, and to gain control over the things they couldn't always explain. This relationship with nature was about more than just living. It was about living with purpose, about honoring the forces that shaped their lives, and about finding a way to coexist with the unpredictable world they called home. Through their rituals and spiritual beliefs, early humans found a way to bring meaning to their world, a world filled with chaos, uncertainty, and danger. They turned the forces of nature into something sacred, something to be respected and honored, and in doing so, they created the first forms of religion. These early spiritual practices helped humans cope with their environment, but they also laid the foundation for the religious and mythological systems that would continue to evolve through human history. Early humans didn't just look at nature as something to survive. They looked at it as a partner in their survival, and through that relationship, they began to build the first spiritual systems that would guide humanity for millennia. The evolution of tools was one of the most significant turning points in human history. Early humans began with the simplest of implements, just stones, rocks, and sticks. But over time, these humble beginnings transformed into complex tools that would reshape the way humans interacted with their environment. Imagine early humans, armed with little more than sharp rocks and a determined will to survive. And then think about how these early tools sparked a revolution in human cognition. The use of tools was the first step toward thinking beyond just basic survival. It was the beginning of innovation, and with each new tool, early humans expanded the limits of what was possible. At first, the tools were simple. A stone or a sharp flake of rock used for cutting or scraping. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make a difference in daily life. These early tools were crafted out of necessity, designed to help early humans butcher meat, crack open bones for marrow, and defend themselves against predators. But as time passed, something amazing happened. Humans started to experiment. They did not just accept the stones around them. They began to think about them, to manipulate them, and to reshape them into tools that would serve a more specific function. And this wasn't just about getting better at surviving. It was about thinking ahead, about making more sophisticated plans to improve their chances of success. As early humans began to experiment with different materials, they realized that stone wasn't the only material they could work with. Bone, wood, and antler all became viable alternatives to stone. These new materials opened up new possibilities. Think about bone, strong and sturdy, yet easier to shape than stone. Early humans began to fashion bone tools for tasks that required precision, like making needles for sewing, scrapers for preparing hides, and even arrowheads for hunting. The antler, with its natural shape and flexibility, became an ideal material for handles, while wood was shaped into tools for digging, sheltering, and hunting. With each new material, early humans found a new way to manipulate the environment and improve their survival. One of the most impressive aspects of this evolution was the development of tools designed for specialized tasks, especially when it came to hunting. Early humans were not just throwing rocks and hoping for the best. They began to design tools that were specific to the animals they hunted. Think about the spearhead. What was once a simple sharp stick became a carefully crafted pointed tip made from flint, bone, or stone. Early humans didn't just use spears for hunting. They fine-tuned them, making sure the point was sharp enough to pierce the flesh of large game like woolly mammoths, bison, and deer. These tools weren't just for quick kills. They were about efficiency and precision. The spear was a game changer, allowing early humans to hunt larger, more dangerous animals that would have been nearly impossible to take down otherwise. And it wasn't just spearheads that became more specialized. Early humans began to design traps, netting, and snare devices to catch prey in new ways. These tools required a level of strategic thinking that went beyond just following animals or throwing spears. Early humans used their knowledge of animal behavior to build traps that could outsmart their prey. Imagine creating a pitfall trap, carefully digging a hole and covering it with branches, or setting up a net trap to capture birds or small mammals. These weren't just rudimentary ideas. These were innovations based on observation, testing, and learning from experience. Early humans were not just reacting to the world around them. They were interacting with it, shaping it, and learning how to make it work in their favor. With the development of more specialized tools, early humans began to move away from mere survival and toward domination of their environment. It was no longer about simply scavenging or gathering what was available. It was about taking control of the landscape and ensuring that the animals they hunted would provide sustenance, shelter, and even clothing. Early humans learned how to process animal hides into clothing, to shape bones into tools, and to harness the power of fire to preserve food, cook meals, and defend against predators. Every innovation, every new tool, was a milestone in human progress. This technological evolution wasn't just about better tools. It was about better thinking. Early humans started to see the world not just as something to survive in, but as something they could change, adapt, and improve. The development of more sophisticated tools was a sign of growing intelligence. The ability to think ahead, to plan, and to execute those plans in the most efficient way possible. Early humans were no longer just reacting to the environment. They were shaping it. But the story doesn't end with just making tools. With these innovations came a shift in social structure. The creation of specialized tools required collaboration, sharing knowledge, and passing down skills. The tools became cultural artifacts, symbols of progress and achievement. As early humans passed on the knowledge of how to create tools, they also passed down stories, rituals, and beliefs associated with those tools. The evolution of tools was tied to the evolution of human culture itself. Tools became not just objects. They became an essential part of identity and community. The complexity of early human tools didn't just serve practical purposes. It reflected the growing cognitive abilities of early humans. As tools became more specialized, so did the minds that created them. Early humans were no longer limited to simple actions. They were now capable of abstract thought, future planning, and strategic problem solving. They began to understand that the world around them could be manipulated to serve their needs, and each new tool made that reality clearer and clearer. By the time these tools were fully developed, early humans had created a sophisticated toolkit for survival, expansion, and innovation. Every tool, every spearhead, every crafted bone told the story of a species that wasn't just surviving. It was beginning to thrive. With every new tool, early humans were not just improving their ability to hunt or build. They were laying the foundation for civilization itself, one tool at a time. Fire was nothing short of a revolution for early humans. It wasn't just a source of warmth or light. It was the key to unlocking an entirely new way of life. Imagine early humans huddled around the flickering light of a fire on a cold, dark night, knowing that it was more than just a flame. It was a lifeline, a tool, and a symbol of their growing mastery over the world around them. Fire didn't just help early humans survive. It gave them the freedom to thrive in a way no other species on Earth could even begin to imagine. One of the most transformative ways fire impacted early human life was through its role in cooking food. Before fire, early humans would have had to eat raw meat, plants, and whatever they could find, which wasn't only difficult, but also dangerous. Raw food was harder to digest and could carry harmful bacteria that led to illness. But when early humans learned to harness fire, they could cook their food, making it not just more palatable, but also easier to digest. Cooking made nutrients more accessible, allowing early humans to get more energy from their meals, which fueled the growing demands of their larger brains. Suddenly, food was no longer just something to fill the stomach. It was something that powered their minds, giving them the ability to think more clearly, plan ahead, and engage in the complex problem-solving that would eventually lead to the development of societies. But cooking wasn't the only way fire changed life. It was also a protective barrier against the many dangers that surrounded early humans, especially the predators that stalked them at night. The world in which they lived was far from safe. Saber-toothed cats, wolves, and hyenas were just some of the creatures that could have been lurking nearby, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But with fire, early humans had a defense, a physical and psychological shield against those dangers. The glow of a fire created a safe zone, pushing dangerous animals away and providing early humans with the security they needed to sleep, eat, and rest without constant fear. Fire allowed them to expand their territory, making them more confident in their ability to defend themselves and their families from predators that had once seemed invincible. Fire didn't just protect early humans. It brought them together. It wasn't just a tool for survival. It was a tool for socialization. Think about the first time early humans gathered around a fire. It wasn't just about staying warm. It was about community, about connecting with each other in a way that wasn't possible before. The fire became the centerpiece of their social life, a place to share stories, experiences, and knowledge. Before fire, early humans had to go to sleep when the sun went down, and they lived in darkness for much of the day. But with fire, the night transformed from a time of danger and uncertainty into a time of connection and growth. Fire extended human activity into the night, allowing for more time to socialize, teach, and even play. With the warmth of the fire, early humans could sit together, share their meals, and discuss plans for the coming days. The fire also created the first shared spaces, places where early humans could bond and organize. In these safe zones, they could strategize about the hunt, divide up tasks, or pass down cultural knowledge. These early social interactions were more than just casual conversations. They were the foundations of community building, where early humans began to understand the power of collaboration. Fire made it possible for early humans to work together, cooperate, and solve problems as a group. It allowed them to develop social structures that would eventually lead to more complex societies. Think about the passing of knowledge. Early humans could share stories, teach skills, and pass down traditions that helped future generations survive and thrive. Fire didn't just extend the day, it transformed it. Early humans could now engage in intellectual development long after the sun had set. They could discuss ideas, plan strategies, and even just reflect on their day. Think about the sheer intellectual freedom that came with the ability to stay awake after dark. Fire gave them the chance to think deeply, solve complex problems, and create new ways to interact with their world. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects of fire's impact on early humans was how it encouraged the development of abstract thought. It wasn't just about lighting the night. It was about transforming the night into an opportunity. The stories shared around the fire weren't just about past hunts. They were about imagination. Early humans could talk about what-ifs, explore ideas that didn't exist in the physical world, and dream about things that might never have been possible without fire. Fire was the catalyst for the human imagination, helping to spark the creation of art, myth, and ritual. With fire, early humans weren't just surviving. They were learning to dream, to plan, and to create. Fire was also the first technology. It wasn't just a tool. It was a force of nature that early humans controlled, and in controlling it, they controlled their fate. Fire was the first step toward mastering the environment, providing the heat, light, and security needed to push forward into new territories and new possibilities. It allowed early humans to take control of their destiny, shaping the world to their needs and becoming the dominant species on Earth. The role of fire in early human life cannot be overstated. It was a transformative force that revolutionized the way early humans lived. Fire brought light, warmth, and safety, but it also created the space for human creativity, socialization, and intellectual development. It allowed early humans to adapt to their environment, shape their future, and build the foundation for everything that followed. It wasn't just a tool of survival. It was the key to the human story. The first evidence of art is nothing short of fascinating. Imagine stepping into the deep, dark cave where early humans left their mark on the world. These marks were not just random scribbles. They were intentional, carefully thought out, and deliberate creations. Early humans weren't just surviving. They were creating. They didn't just leave behind tools or animal bones. They left behind something that speaks to the very essence of what it means to be human. Art. These early forms of art, whether in the form of cave paintings, carvings, or even early sculptures, show us that early humans had begun to think abstractly. They didn't just see the world. They interpreted it, expressed it, and sought to understand it in ways that went beyond the practical. Early human creativity is revealed in the stunning cave paintings found deep within caves across the world. These aren't just pictures of the animals they hunted. These are representations of the world as early humans saw it, with all its beauty and danger. Imagine walking into a cave that's been dark for thousands of years, only to see the flickering images of bison, deer, buffalo, and horses etched on the walls. These paintings were not just for decoration. They were expressions of life itself, depicting animals they revered, hunted, and perhaps even spiritually connected with. The colors used were made from natural pigments, carefully mixed with water or animal fat, and applied with the hands or primitive brushes. This wasn't just about recording reality. It was about symbolizing the importance of these animals in the lives of early humans. Early humans didn't just hunt animals. They honored them, understanding that the life cycle of these animals was deeply connected to their own survival. But the art was not limited to cave paintings. Early humans also created carvings and sculptures, showing a level of three-dimensional thinking that goes beyond simple functional use. These weren't just abstract images. They were representations of the world, of the spiritual beliefs and stories that early humans wanted to pass down. The famous Venus figurines, carved from stone, ivory, or bone, are some of the best-known examples of early human art. These small statues of women, often with exaggerated features, are thought to represent fertility, motherhood, or perhaps the spiritual essence of the female form. These figurines weren't just decorative. They were likely part of early rituals, used to invoke fertility or to honor the life-giving forces of nature. They tell us that early humans were thinking symbolically, seeing certain images not just as physical representations, but as carriers of deeper meaning. But the most striking part of all this early art is the abstract thinking it represents. Early humans didn't just create for survival, they created for expression. They didn't just observe the world, they began to interpret it in symbolic terms, using art to express ideas, emotions, and beliefs that went far beyond the here and now. This was a cognitive leap that marked the beginning of culture as we know it today. It shows us that early humans didn't just respond to the world around them. They began to understand it on a much deeper level, creating meaning from the physical world. This kind of thinking was abstract, meaning it went beyond the practical and into the realm of symbolism, belief, and expression. It's important to understand that these early pieces of art were not just about being aesthetically pleasing or decorative. They had a functional role too. They were likely tied to rituals and spiritual beliefs, serving to connect early humans to the world beyond. The animals painted on cave walls weren't just there to remember a successful hunt. They were spiritual symbols, embodying qualities like power, fertility, and strength. These images served as a way for early humans to express their connection to the forces of nature, to understand the cycle of life and death, and to communicate the unseen forces that shaped their lives. The cognitive leap required to think abstractly wasn't just a matter of brain development. It was the beginning of cultural evolution, the birth of human identity. Humans were not just surviving, they were creating culture, passing down ideas, rituals, and stories through symbols and art. What this all shows us is how early humans didn't just live. They made sense of their world in ways that were deeply meaningful. The development of tools for survival was just the beginning of a much larger transformation. As early humans crafted stone tools, they were developing the skills necessary to shape the world around them. But with art, they began to shape the mind itself. Art wasn't just about utility. It was the gateway to abstract thought. It was the space where humans could explore the unseen, question the unknown, and begin to create a shared human experience. The paintings, carvings, and figurines we find today are not just remnants of a primitive past. They are the evidence of the cognitive leap that propelled humanity into the future, giving rise to language, philosophy, and the arts that would define human culture for millennia. The first evidence of art tells a story not just of survival, but of the human need to connect with the world on a deeper level. Early humans weren't just trying to get by. They were trying to understand the forces that shaped their world, to make sense of their place in the universe. Through cave paintings, figurines, and carvings, they showed us that their minds were capable of much more than simple survival. They were capable of dreaming, imagining, and creating the foundation of human culture. What's incredible is that this artistic expression wasn't just a product of their environment. It was the spark that ignited culture, and ultimately, it sparked everything that came after it. Language, storytelling, rituals, and the very essence of being human. As the Ice Age came to an end, the world that early humans once knew began to change in profound ways. The glaciers retreated, the climate shifted, and life began to adapt to the new conditions. But even as the world transformed, the legacy of early humans endured. The tools they made, the knowledge they passed down, and the social structures they created didn't just vanish with the changing of the seasons. They laid the foundation for everything that would come after. These early humans were the first to leave their mark on the world, and their struggles, innovations, and triumphs set the stage for the rise of Homo sapiens, the species that would eventually become the dominant force on Earth. The tools early humans crafted weren't just for survival. They were the tools of innovation and progress. From those early stone tools to the more complex implements that came later, these creations showed that humans weren't just reacting to their environment, they were shaping it. The knowledge they accumulated about their surroundings, the skills they honed over time, and the social bonds they formed were the stepping stones for the future of humanity. Early humans were not just surviving. They were building the future with every spear they crafted, every fire they made, and every social structure they established. Their journey wasn't just about adapting to their environment. It was about changing it. The social bonds they formed, the way they worked together in groups, and the communication they developed were all precursors to the development of more complex societies. And let's not forget about the spiritual legacy they left behind. The rituals, the symbolism, and the stories they passed down weren't just about their beliefs. They were about the foundation of culture itself. The early human connection to the world around them, their relationship with nature, and their need to understand the unseen forces at play all laid the groundwork for the emergence of religions, philosophies, and cultural traditions that would shape humanity for millennia. The art they created, the symbols they left behind, were not just reflections of their lives. They were the seeds of everything that would come to define human culture. These early humans didn't just survive. They created meaning in their world, and in doing so, they laid the groundwork for everything that would follow. As early humans evolved, their journey wasn't just about the challenges they faced. It was about how they responded to those challenges. They weren't passive beings at the mercy of nature. They became active agents of change in the world. Their ability to adapt, innovate, and cooperate transformed them into a species capable of surviving against all odds. They didn't just learn how to hunt or build shelters. They learned how to shape the world around them. Every struggle they faced, from harsh climates to dangerous predators, was an opportunity to adapt and grow. And as they grew, they evolved. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and socially. The path from early humans to Homo sapiens wasn't a straight line. It was a journey of constant adaptation, trial, and error. Every breakthrough in tool-making, every development in communication, and every social innovation helped shape the course of human evolution. The transition from simple survival to cultural and intellectual growth marked the beginning of civilization as we know it. Early humans learned to not only survive the harshest environments, but to transform them, creating communities, building tools, and developing ways of life that would last for generations. They didn't just learn to live. They learned to thrive, turning hardship into opportunity. The evolutionary leap wasn't just about physical survival. It was about the growth of the mind. Early humans developed the ability to think abstractly, to communicate complex ideas, and to imagine a world beyond the immediate present. They began to plan for the future, create culture, and pass down knowledge to future generations. What began as a fight for survival evolved into the ability to shape the future, to build societies, and to dominate the planet in ways that no other species could match. The tools they created didn't just help them survive. They helped them thrive and ultimately change the world. Reflecting on the story of early humans is not just a tale of survival. It's a story of transformation, adaptation, and growth. It's a story of how a species that once lived at the mercy of nature began to understand it, shape it, and dominate it. Early humans didn't just endure. They evolved, becoming the beings who would one day create art, technology, and civilizations. Through their struggles, They didn't just survive. They laid the foundation for everything that came after. They paved the way for the development of modern societies, the rise of culture, and the creation of the world we live in today. Their journey was one of constant change, from the first stone tools to the complex societies we have now. Early humans didn't just survive. They evolved into the beings who would eventually dominate the planet, leaving a legacy that still shapes us today.